The great chamber stretched as far as the eye could see. Thousands of seats rose in circles, each one holding a representative from a different world. Some were tall and thin like walking sticks. Others looked like giant insects with too many legs. Some floated in tanks of colored water. Some glowed with their own light. They came from every corner of the galaxy. And today, they were all here for one reason. They were here to vote on what to do with Earth. Ambassador Chum Wei stood at the center of the chamber floor. He was alone. The spotlight made him look small compared to the massive room around him. He wore a simple black suit, the kind diplomats on Earth had worn for centuries. His hands were folded behind his back. His face showed nothing. Above him, the vote count appeared in the air like magic. Numbers made of light that everyone could see. The question was simple. Should humanity be made into servants of the Galactic Council? Should Earth and all its colonies be forced to work for the greater galaxy? One by one, the votes came in. The Vraxi Collective voted yes. Their representative clicked its mandibles together in satisfaction. The Vraxi looked like massive praying mantises, each one standing 3 meters tall. They had been part of the council for 2,000 years. The Luminar Communion voted yes. Their delegate was a being made of living crystal that pulsed with inner light. They spoke through vibrations that computers translated into words. They had been in space before humans learned to make fire. The Tethian Empire voted yes. Their ambassador floated in a tank of glowing blue liquid, tentacles waving slowly. They had invented faster than light travel. When humans were still drawing on cave walls, vote after vote came in. Yes, yes, yes. Chen Wei watched the numbers climb. He did not move. He did not speak. He barely seemed to breathe. The final count appeared in the air. 847 civilizations voted yes. Only 3 voted no. 12 chose not to vote at all. The chamber filled with sounds. Clicks, chirps, songs, and noises that human ears were not made to hear. The council was pleased with itself. The speaker of the council stood. It was an ancient being called an Archon. It looked almost human, but wrong in ways that were hard to explain. Too tall, skin too perfect, eyes too bright. It had lived for over 300 years and ruled the council for most of that time. The vote is decided, the Archon said. Its voice was beautiful and terrible at the same time. Humanity will be classified as a resource tributary. Earth and its colonies will provide labor, materials, and innovation to the greater galactic community. This is for the good of all. Chun Wei finally moved. He raised his head and looked directly at the Archon. Then he looked slowly around the chamber, meeting as many eyes as he could. Some of the delegates looked away. Others stared back with what might have been pity or satisfaction or nothing at all. You have made a grave mistake today, Chen Wei said. His voice was quiet, but it carried through the whole chamber. You will remember this vote, and you will regret it. Then he walked out. Nobody stopped him. The council was confused by his words. Some delegates laughed. Others felt uneasy, but did not know why. The Archon dismissed the session, already planning how to enforce the new law. 6 weeks later, the council sent its enforcement fleet to Earth's solar system. It was not a small force. 40 capital ships, each one the size of a small city. 200 support vessels. Enough firepower to crack a planet's crust if needed. The fleet commander was a Vraxi general named Clethvar. He had fought in 30 campaigns and never lost. Clethvar expected resistance. Young species always resisted at first. They fought until they understood they could not win. Then they surrendered. Then they accepted their new place in the galaxy. It was always the same. But when the fleet arrived in the solar system, something was wrong. All the human military stations were dark. No power signatures, no communications. The orbital defense platforms around Earth were empty. The colony on Mars showed no signs of life. The mining stations in the asteroid belt were abandoned. "Where are they?" Clethvar asked his officers. Nobody had an answer. The fleet moved deeper into the system. They approached Earth itself. The planet was there, blue and green and beautiful. But the satellites were gone. The defense grid was offline. There were no ships in orbit. "Send a message to the Council," Clethvar ordered. "Tell them the humans have fled. We will begin occupation of." That was when the trap closed. Ships appeared from everywhere at once. They had been hiding in the radiation of the sun. They had been drifting like dead rocks in the asteroid field. They had been coated in material that made them invisible to sensors. Now they came alive all at once. Human ships. Hundreds of them. But they were not the ships the Council had seen before. These were different. Faster. Deadlier. They carried weapons that the Council had never allowed humans to have. Weapons that should not exist. The first missile hit Clethvar's flagship before he could give an order. It did not explode like normal missiles. Instead, it drilled into the hull and released something inside. The ship's systems started dying one by one. Lights flickered. Gravity failed. Life support stuttered. "They are using nanomachines," someone shouted. "How do they have nanomachine weapons?" All around them, Council ships were dying. The human vessels moved in patterns that seemed random but were not. They struck and faded away. They used the debris of destroyed ships as cover. They coordinated their attacks with perfect timing. Clethvar tried to organize a defense. He tried to form his ships into proper battle formations. But the humans did not fight like proper enemies. They did not engage in fleet combat. They attacked from unexpected angles. They used tactics that were considered dishonorable. They fought to win, not to follow the rules. The battle lasted 6 hours. When it was over, only 3 Council ships escaped. Clethvar was not on them. His flagship was a broken shell floating dead in space. Most of the Council's enforcement fleet was debris. The 3 surviving ships jumped to faster than light speed and ran. Behind them, Earth broadcast a message on every frequency. It reached every corner of the galaxy. The message was simple. "You voted for war. Now you have it." In the Galactic Council chamber, the delegates watched the footage in stunned silence. They saw their mighty fleet destroyed. They saw human weapons that should not exist. They saw tactics that broke every rule of civilized warfare. The Archon stood frozen, unable to speak. Finally, a Luminar delegate spoke. Its crystal form pulsed with what might have been fear. "What have we done?" it asked. Nobody answered. They all knew. They had poked a sleeping monster. And now it was awake and very, very angry. The emergency session of the Galactic Council happened just 3 days after the Battle of the Kuiper Belt. Every delegate who could travel arrived in person. The ones who could not send holographic projections. Nobody wanted to miss this meeting. The Archon looked older than it had a month ago. Its perfect skin showed lines that had not been there before. It stood at the center of the chamber and spoke in a voice that did not sound as confident as usual. "We have a situation," it said. "The humans were more prepared than we anticipated." A Vraxi delegate stood up quickly. Its mandibles clicked with anger. "Prepared? They destroyed our enforcement fleet. 40 capital ships. This was not preparation. This was treachery. They must have been building weapons in secret," a Tethian representative said from its water tank. "They've been lying to us since first contact." Chen Wei's words from the original vote echoed in many minds. "You have made a grave mistake today." A small delegate from a species called the Rixil spoke up. The Rixil looked like furry mammals with too many eyes. Their world had been a council tributary for 500 years before earning full membership. "Perhaps we made the mistake," the Rixo said quietly. Perhaps we should not have voted to enslave them. The Archon's eyes flashed with anger. We voted to integrate them into the galactic community. For the good of all. We voted to make them slaves, the Rixo said. Let us at least be honest about what we did. The chamber erupted into argument. Some wanted to send more fleets. Others wanted to negotiate. A few wanted to pretend the whole thing never happened and hope the humans would accept the deal. But the humans did not wait for the council to decide. Reports started coming in from across the galaxy. Human ships had been spotted near council worlds. Not attacking, just watching, observing, studying. Some council members found human vessels in their home systems, just sitting there, as if to say, we can reach you whenever we want. Then the attacks began, but not against the council's core worlds. The humans struck at military bases and supply lines. They hit shipyards and weapons factories. Every target was chosen carefully to hurt the council's ability to make war. The council sent its second fleet. It was even larger than the first. 60 capital ships, 300 support vessels, the best commanders, the newest weapons. The second fleet lasted 4 days. The humans had learned from the first battle. They did not meet the fleet in open combat. Instead, they struck the supply ships first. Then they used small, fast vessels to plant bombs on the capital ships while they slept. When the fleet tried to regroup, they found that half their ships had explosives attached to their engines. The fleet commander tried to surrender. The humans let most of the ships go, but they kept all the weapons. And they recorded the surrender and broadcast it across the galaxy. The message was clear. The mighty Galactic Council could be beaten. The Council was not invincible. That was when other species started paying attention. For thousands of years, the Council had ruled the galaxy. Not every species was equal in the Council. Some were full members with votes. Others were tributaries, forced to give resources and labor. The tributaries had no choice. They obeyed or they were punished. But now they saw humans fighting back and winning. The first tributary to rebel was a species called the Darin. They were small blue-skinned people who had been tributaries for 800 years. They made computer systems for the Council. One day, they simply stopped. They sent a message to the Council saying they would not work anymore unless they were given full membership. The Council sent ships to punish them. Before the ships arrived, human vessels appeared in orbit around the Darin homeworld. Not attacking, just there, watching. The Council ships turned around and left. Then another tributary rebelled. And another. Each time, humans showed up to protect them. Sometimes just by being there. Sometimes by fighting. The humans also sent representatives to meet with tributary species in secret. They offered weapons. They offered training. They offered alliance. They said the same thing to every species they met. You do not have to be slaves. We will help you be free. Within a year, 20 tributary species had declared independence. The Council was losing control. Every time they tried to send military forces to restore order, humans were there to stop them. The Galactic Council was facing a problem they had never encountered before. They called it the human problem. A council military analyst named Vextar studied every battle against the humans. He was of Raxi, like the general who had died at the Kuiper Belt. He spent months reviewing footage, studying tactics, trying to understand how the humans fought. Finally, he wrote a report. The council made him present it in person. Vextar stood before the assembled delegates and shared his findings. His mandibles clicked nervously as he spoke. We have been approaching this wrong, he said. We think the humans are just another species. They are not. Explain, the Archon demanded. Every species we have encountered fights for territory or resources or honor, Vextar said. The humans fight for something else. They fight to make you afraid. Every tactic they use is designed to break your spirit, not just your ships. He showed footage from battles. Human ships that deliberately rammed Council vessels even when they could escape. Human soldiers who kept fighting even when wounded. Human broadcasts that showed Council forces surrendering or running away. They do not care about honor, Vexstar continued. They do not follow the rules of war. They use biological weapons. They use psychological warfare. They pretend to surrender and then attack. They target supply lines instead of military bases. They arm our enemies and teach them to rebel. These are the tactics of barbarians, a delegate said with disgust. These are the tactics of a species that intends to win, Vexstar replied. And it is working. Our forces are afraid of them. Our forces are afraid of them. Our tributaries are rebelling. Our economy is suffering. We are losing this war. The chamber fell silent. What do you recommend? The Archon asked quietly. Vexstar's mandibles drooped. I recommend we negotiate for peace before we lose everything. The Archon looked around the chamber. Many delegates would not meet its eyes. The proud civilizations that had ruled the galaxy for millennia were being brought to their knees by a species that had only been in space for 200 years. No, the Archon said finally. We will not surrender to primitives. We will escalate. We will show them that the Council's power cannot be challenged. But many delegates left that meeting with doubt in their hearts. They had seen the footage. They had heard the reports. They knew the truth that the Archon refused to accept. Humanity was not losing this war. The Council was. 2 years after the original vote, the Galactic Council controlled less than half of its former territory. 30 tributary species had gained independence with human help. The Council's economy was in crisis. Its military was stretched thin across 100 fronts, and in human space, they were building more ships, better weapons, training more soldiers. The war was far from over, but everyone in the galaxy knew how it would end. The only question was how much it would cost before the Council finally admitted defeat. In a secret transmission, a human admiral sent a message to the Council. It was simple and direct. You can surrender now with dignity, or you can surrender later with nothing. Your choice, but you will surrender. The Archon deleted the message without responding. But alone in its chambers, for the first time in 3 centuries, it felt something it had never felt before. Fear. The war had been going on for 3 years now. The Galactic Council was breaking apart from the inside. The Luminar Communion was the first major species to withdraw from the war. They were beings of living crystal who had existed peacefully for thousands of years. They had seen enough death. Their representative made an announcement that shocked the Council. We will no longer participate in this war, the Luminar said. Its crystal body pulsed with sadness. We have reviewed all the data, all the battle reports, all the projections. Every analysis leads to the same conclusion. This war cannot be won, cannot or will not. The Archon demanded. Both, the Luminar replied. The humans are willing to die for their freedom. Are we willing to die to take it from them? Our people say no. We are going home. The Luminar ships left the war. Thousands of vessels that simply flew away and did not come back. Other species watched and wondered if they should do the same. The Tethian Empire did not withdraw publicly, but they started secret talks with human diplomats. The Tethians were smart. They had not survived for 10,000 years by being stubborn. They knew when to change sides. They offered to humans technology, advanced faster-than-light drives, weapons designs, tactical information about Council defenses. In exchange, they asked only that humanity leave the Tethian homeworld alone. The humans agreed. They even sent medical supplies when a plague broke out on one of the Tethian colony worlds. The Tevians had expected humans to be monsters. Instead, they found humans could be generous even to former enemies. Word of this spread. Other species started to wonder. If the Tevians could make peace with humanity, maybe they could too. But the real change happened not on the battlefield. It happened on the worlds that humans conquered. When Council forces took over a world, they stripped it of resources. They forced the population to work. They took what they wanted and gave nothing back. This had been the way of the galaxy for thousands of years. When humans took over a world, they did something different. The planet Xerxia had been a Council military base. When human forces captured it, the Xerxian people expected to become slaves of new masters. Instead, the humans built schools. They built hospitals. They repaired infrastructure that the Council had let fall apart. A human general named Sarah Martinez met with the Xerxian leaders. She was tall and scarred from combat. She had lost an eye in the Battle of the Kuiper Belt, but she spoke to the Xerxians with respect. "You are not our prisoners," she told them. "You are free. We ask only that you do not help the Council attack us. In return, we will help you rebuild your world." The Xerxian elder looked at her with confusion. "Why? We fought against you." "You fought because you had no choice," Martinez replied. "Now you do. Choose freedom." The Xerxians chose to ally with humanity. So did the next world the humans liberated. And the next. And the next. The Council tried to counter this with propaganda. They broadcast messages saying the humans were tricking people, that the humans would betray their new allies, that humans could not be trusted. But the propaganda did not work, because people could see the difference between Council rule and human rule. They could see that humans treated even their enemies with more respect than the Council treated its own members. The Vraxi Collective had been one of the Council's strongest military powers. But after 3 years of war, they had lost more than half their fleet. Their economy was collapsing. Their people were tired of fighting. The Vraxi Queen called a meeting of the entire collective. Billions of Vraxi listened as she spoke. Her voice was transmitted across every Vraxi world. "We voted to enslave humanity because we feared what they might become," the Queen said. "We were wrong. Not about their strength. We were right about that. But we were wrong about what they would do with that strength." She paused. When she spoke again, her voice was filled with something the Vraxi rarely showed: shame. "We have seen how they treat the worlds they conquer. We have seen how they treat prisoners. We have seen how they treat even those who fought against them. And then we look at ourselves, and how we treat the species we conquered, and how we treat our own tributaries. And we are ashamed." The announcement that followed shocked the galaxy. The Vraxi Collective was surrendering to humanity, not just ending hostilities, actually surrendering. And they were asking humanity for protection from the Council's retaliation. The humans accepted. They sent ships to defend Vraxi space. They sent aid to help rebuild the Vraxi economy. They treated the Vraxi with honor even though the Vraxi had been among their worst enemies. The Archon was furious. It called the Vraxi traitors. It threatened to destroy the Vraxi homeworld. But it could not spare the ships to do it. The Council's military was spread too thin, fighting too many battles, losing too much ground. That was when the Archon made its final decision. If the Council could not win by fighting, it would win by genocide. In secret, the Archon ordered the construction of a weapon called a stellar collapser. It was a device that could make a star go supernova. It had been banned by galactic law for thousands of years. The weapon was considered too horrible to use even in war, but the Archon was beyond caring about laws. It wanted to destroy Earth's sun, kill all humans in their home system, send a message to the galaxy that the Council would never surrender. The construction happened on a remote station. Thousands of workers were forced to build it. Most of them were from tributary species. They worked in terrible conditions. Many died. The Archon did not care. Human intelligence learned about the weapon. They sent operatives to stop it. One of them was a woman named Lisa Tanaka. She was a spy who had infiltrated dozens of council facilities. She was very good at her job. Tanaka made it to the Archon's homeworld. She snuck into the Archon's private chambers. The Archon found her there one night, standing in the dark. The Archon moved to call for guards. Tanaka raised a hand. "I am not here to kill you," she said calmly. "Though I could. I am here to show you something." She activated a holographic projector. Images filled the air between them. Workers dying while building the stellar collapser. Entire cities on tributary worlds stripped of resources to fund the weapon. Children starving because the food that should have fed them went to the weapon project instead. "This is what you became to defeat us," Tanaka said. "Look at it. Really look at it. This is not defense. This is not justice. This is genocide. And these are the people you hurt to make it possible." The Archon stared at the images. For the first time in centuries, it saw clearly what it had become. "We voted to enslave you because we feared you would become tyrants," the Archon said quietly. "But we became tyrants to fight you." "Yes," Tanaka replied. "Was it worth it?" She left without another word. She did not kill the Archon. She did not need to. The truth was a sharper weapon than any blade. 3 days later, the Archon activated the stellar collapser remotely. It was supposed to destroy Earth's sun. Nothing happened. The weapon had been sabotaged. Not by human spies. By council members themselves. Scientists who could not live with what they were being forced to build. Engineers who had families on worlds that were being stripped to pay for the weapon. Guards who were tired of following orders from a leader who had lost all sense of morality. The council's own people had stopped the weapon. They had sabotaged it from within. And then they had gone public with what the Archon had tried to do. The news spread across the galaxy in hours. Every species learned that the Archon had tried to commit genocide. That it had been willing to kill billions to win a war it had started. The council delegates met in emergency session. For the first time in the council's history, they voted to remove their leader. The Archon was arrested by its own guards. It did not resist. As it was led away, the Archon spoke to the assembled delegates one last time. "I did what I thought was necessary," it said. "I did what I believed would save us." An old Rixil delegate stood up. "You did not save us. You nearly destroyed us. Not our ships or our worlds. Our souls. We became monsters to fight monsters we created in our own imagination." The Archon had no response. It was taken away to prison. It would spend the rest of its very long life thinking about the mistakes it had made. The interim council government sent a message to humanity that same day. Simple and direct. "We request an armistice. We are ready to talk about peace." The humans agreed. But they had conditions. The meeting would not happen on neutral ground. It would happen on Earth itself. The council delegates would have to come to the world they had voted to enslave. They would have to face the people they had tried to destroy, and they would have to answer for what they had done. 4 years had passed since the vote that changed everything. Now the council delegates were coming to Earth, not as conquerors. As supplicants, the council's new interim government had sent 50 delegates. Each one represented a major species or political bloc. They traveled in unarmed ships as a sign of good faith. Human vessels escorted them all the way to Earth's solar system. The delegates expected to land at some military base, to be paraded as defeated enemies, to be humiliated as punishment for what they had done. That was how the council would have treated defeated foes. Instead, they landed at a civilian spaceport in Geneva. The same city where humanity had first established its own united government centuries ago. There were no soldiers with weapons, no prisoners in chains, just diplomats and officials waiting to greet them. Chen Wei was there. He looked older now. His hair had gone completely gray. There were new scars on his face and hands. He had not spent the war safely behind a desk. He had fought on the front lines, leading troops in the liberation of 3 different worlds. He stood at the front of the human delegation. When the council representatives came down the ramp of their ship, he stepped forward to meet them. The lead council delegate was a Luminer named Crystallis. She had been one of the 12 who abstained from the original vote. Her crystal body pulsed with what humans had learned was embarrassment. "Ambassador Chen Wei," she said formally, "on behalf of the Galactic Council, I thank you for agreeing to meet with us." Chen Wei looked at her for a long moment. Then he extended his hand. "Welcome to Earth, Delegate Crystallis. I hope your journey was peaceful." She seemed surprised by the gesture. Slowly, she reached out and touched his hand with one of her crystalline appendages. It was the Luminer equivalent of a handshake. "It was," she said softly. "Your escort treated us with great courtesy." "Good," Chen Wei replied. "Whatever happened in the past, you're guests here now. You will be treated with respect." The other delegates seemed confused by this. A Tevian representative whispered to his companion, "Is this a trick? Are they going to arrest us?" But there was no trick. The humans meant what they said. The delegates were taken to hotels in the city. Real hotels, not prisons. They were given comfortable rooms and good food. They could move around freely, though human security kept a discreet distance. They were treated like honored guests, not defeated enemies. That night, many of the delegates could not sleep. They talked among themselves about how strange this was, how different from what they expected. The next morning, the real peace talks began. But before they discussed terms, Chen Wei insisted on something. "Before we talk about the future," he said, "I want to show you what this war cost. I want you to see what your vote did to my world." He took them on a tour of human cities, but not the gleaming capitals that had survived untouched. He took them to places that had been bombed, to factories that had been repurposed to make weapons, to hospitals still full of wounded soldiers. They walked through a memorial garden outside of Beijing. 4 million names were carved into black stone. 4 million humans who had died in the war. Each name represented a life, a family, dreams that would never be fulfilled. A young Vraxi delegate named Klextor stood in front of the wall for a long time. He was barely an adult by Vraxi standards. He had not even been alive when the vote happened, but he had fought in the war for the last 2 years. "I killed some of these people," he said quietly. "I never thought about them as individuals. They were just targets, just enemies. But they had names. They had families." "Yes," Chen Wei said. "Just like the Vraxi soldiers who died had names and families. Just like everyone who died in this war was somebody's child or parent or friend. They visited schools where children were being taught about the war. The human teachers did not teach hatred. They taught history. They explained how the war started. They talked about the mistakes both sides made. They emphasized the importance of never forgetting, but also never letting hatred consume you." A poor Tevian delegate listened to a class and then spoke quietly to Chen Wei. "You are teaching your children to not hate us, even after everything." "We are teaching them to understand," Chen Wei replied. "Hatred is easy. Understanding is hard. But understanding is how we make sure this never happens again." The delegates saw human factories that had been converted from making weapons back to making civilian goods. They saw scientists who had spent 4 years developing new ways to kill, now working on projects to help people. They saw a civilization trying to heal itself, but they also saw the cost. The economy struggling, the families with empty chairs at dinner tables, the soldiers with missing limbs and haunted eyes, the children who had grown up knowing only war. After 3 days of this, the actual negotiations began. The council delegates sat on one side of a large table. The human delegation sat on the other. The whole galaxy was watching via broadcast. Chen Wei placed a document in the center of the table. "These are humanity's terms for peace," he said. "Read them carefully." The council delegates expected the worst. Territorial demands, massive reparations, executions of leaders, occupation of council worlds. What they found instead shocked them. Humanity wanted no territory. They claimed no council worlds for themselves. They demanded no money. They asked for no trials or executions. Instead, they demanded reformation. The document laid out a complete restructuring of galactic governance. The council would be dissolved. In its place would be a new organization called the Galactic Assembly. Every species would have an equal vote, regardless of how long they had been in space or how powerful they were. Tributary status would be abolished. All subjugated species would be freed immediately, and humanity would maintain its military as an independent force. If any species ever tried to enslave or subjugate another again, humanity would intervene. They were declaring themselves the guardians of galactic freedom. These terms are generous, Crystallis said carefully. More generous than we deserve. More generous than we would have offered if we had won. We know, Chen Wei said bluntly. That is the difference between us. A Vraxi delegate named Shurkax stood up angrily. You expect us to accept this? You expect us to allow you to maintain military superiority? To give you the right to interfere in our affairs? Yes, Chen Wei said calmly. Because you proved you cannot be trusted with power. For thousands of years, the Council ruled through force and fear. You enslaved species weaker than you. You exploited worlds that could not defend themselves. Someone needs to make sure you never do that again. And you think you are qualified? Shurkax demanded. You, who spent 4 years fighting a brutal war. Chen Wei's eyes went cold. We fought a brutal war because you voted to enslave us. We did not start this. We finished it. And yes, we are qualified. Because unlike you, we know what it means to be enslaved. We know what it means to be told you are inferior because you are young or different. We will never let that happen to anyone else. The chamber fell silent. Shurkax slowly sat down. He had no response. Another delegate stood. It was an Archon, but not the one who had led the council before. This one was younger, less arrogant. May I speak? It asked. Of course, Chen Wei said. I have a question, the young Archon said. Why are you being merciful? You won. You could demand anything. You could enslave us as we tried to enslave you. Why do you not? Chen Wei was quiet for a moment. When he spoke, his voice was firm but not angry. Because we did not fight this war for revenge. We fought for freedom. For ourselves and for everyone else. If we become tyrants now, then we prove that you were right to fear us. We prove that power corrupts everyone eventually. I refuse to let that happen. He looked around the table at all the delegates. You voted to enslave us because you feared we might one day threaten the galaxy's order. But the galaxy's order was already tyranny. It was already based on the strong dominating the weak. We did not come to your stars seeking conquest. You brought war to us. We simply finished it. Crystallis stood up. Her crystal body pulsed with light. You are right. I see that now. We see it now. The galaxy's order was tyranny, and we were too comfortable within it to notice. She turned to face the other council delegates. Humanity was never the threat to galactic peace. We were. We voted to enslave them not because they were dangerous, but because they questioned our authority. Because they asked why some species should rule over others. Because they threatened our comfortable position at the top of the hierarchy. She turned back to Chun Wei. You asked us to come here, to face what we did. I have faced it. I have seen the cost of our pride and our fear. On behalf of my people, I accept your terms. The Luminar Communion will support the creation of the Galactic Assembly. We will support ending tributary status for all species. And we will accept humanity's role as guardians of freedom. One by one, other delegates stood and agreed. Some did so reluctantly. Some did so with obvious relief. But they agreed. Shurkax was the last to stand. The angry Vraxi delegate looked at Chen Wei for a long time. Finally, he spoke. I hate that you won. I hate that you beat us. I hate that you are forcing us to change everything about how the galaxy works. He paused. But I hate more what we became trying to beat you. My people lost our honor in this war. Perhaps your way is the path to regaining it. The Vraxi accept your terms. Chun Wei nodded. Then let us begin building something better. The treaty was signed in the same chamber where humanity had first been welcomed into the galactic community. The symbolism was not lost on anyone. This was the room where the vote to enslave Earth had taken place. Now it was where freedom was being written into galactic law. The Treaty of Earth became the foundation for the new Galactic Assembly. Every species, no matter how young or old, would have one vote. Decisions would be made by majority rule, not by the will of the powerful few. No species could be forced to serve another. No world could be made into a tributary dot. It looked good on paper. But making it real would be much harder. The first year after the treaty was difficult. Many council species struggled with the new reality. They had spent thousands of years at the top of the hierarchy. Now they were being told they were equal to species they once ruled over. Some accepted this easily. Others fought against it. Humanity maintained the largest military fleet in the galaxy. They made it very clear that they would not reduce their forces until the new system was proven to work. Some species complained that this made humanity the new tyrants. But most understood. Trust was not rebuilt overnight. There were incidents. A Vraxi colony tried to force a neighboring species back into tributary status. Human ships arrived within hours. The Vraxi backed down without a shot being fired. A Tevian warlord declared independence and started raiding trade routes. Human marines captured him in less than a week. Each time humanity intervened, they followed the same pattern. Stop the aggression. Restore order. Then leave. They did not occupy. They did not control. They enforced the law and then withdrew. But not all humans agreed with this approach. 5 years after the treaty, a political movement started on Earth and its colonies. It was led by a general named Marcus Cole. He had fought in some of the worst battles of the war. He had lost friends and family. He had seen the worst that the council could do. General Cole gave speeches across human space. His message was simple and appealing to many who were tired. We won the war, he said, but we are still at risk. The council species say they accept the treaty, but do they really? Or are they just waiting for us to let our guard down? We should strike first. We should make sure they can never threaten us again. His movement gained followers. Thousands of humans who agreed that the galaxy could not be trusted. Who wanted humanity to rule, not just protect. Who believed that the only way to be safe was to be dominant. Chen Wei watched this movement grow with concern. He was older now, in his 70s. He had retired from active diplomacy and taken a position as Secretary General of the Human Systems Alliance. He had hoped to spend his remaining years helping to build peace. Instead, he found himself fighting a new kind of battle. He asked to speak to the Human Assembly. The speech was broadcast across all human worlds. Chen Wei stood at the podium, looking tired but determined. "I understand why some of you are afraid," he began. "I understand why you do not trust the galaxy. I was there when they voted to enslave us. I saw their arrogance. I fought in the war. I watched friends die." He paused, letting his words sink in. "But I also remember why we fought. We did not fight to become the Council. We fought to end what the Council represented. The belief that might makes right. The idea that the strong should dominate the weak. The conviction that some species are superior to others." His voice grew stronger. "They voted to enslave us because they feared we might become tyrants. If we become the very thing they feared, then we prove their vote was justified. We prove that power corrupts everyone. We prove that humanity is no different than the Council was." He looked directly into the camera, speaking to every human watching. "We fought for freedom. Not just our freedom. Freedom for everyone. We do not surrender that principle just because we won. We do not abandon our values just because it would be easier or safer to do so." The speech did not convince everyone. General Cole and his followers still argued for a more aggressive approach. But Chen Wei's words resonated with enough people that the movement lost momentum. Humanity would continue to be guardians, not conquerors. Meanwhile, the former Council species were going through their own reckonings. War crime tribunals were established across the galaxy, not because humanity demanded them. The species themselves wanted them. The Vraxi held trials for military commanders who had committed atrocities during the war. The Tethians investigated leaders who had ordered attacks on civilian targets. The Luminar created truth commissions to document everything that had been done in the Council's name. The disgraced Archon who had led the Council was put on trial. It was the most watched trial in galactic history. The Archon could have refused to testify. It could have stayed silent. Instead, it chose to speak. For 3 weeks, the former Chancellor described in detail how the Council had operated, how fear and pride had driven every decision, how the Council had convinced itself that enslaving weaker species was for their own good, how it had become so comfortable with power that it could not imagine living without it. "We told ourselves we were bringing order to the galaxy," the Archon said. "We told ourselves that our rule was benevolent, that the tributary species needed us to guide them. But the truth is simpler and uglier. We liked being in control. We liked having others serve us. We created a philosophy to justify what we wanted to do anyway." The Archon was found guilty of war crimes and sentenced to life imprisonment. But its testimony had an impact. It forced every species to look at their own actions, to ask themselves uncomfortable questions about what they had supported and why. On Earth, humanity was building its own memorials. The largest was in New York City, built on the site of the old United Nations headquarters. It was a massive structure of black stone and glass. The walls were covered with names. Not just the names of humans who died in the war. The names of everyone who died. Vraxi soldiers, Tethian civilians, Luminar scientists, even Council leaders who had been killed in battle. 4 million human names, but also 2 million names from other species. Every death from the war was recorded. Above the entrance was an inscription in 100 languages. It read, "They were not our enemy. Fear was our enemy. Pride was our enemy. These were merely its victims." Some humans objected. Why honor enemy soldiers? Why remember those who had tried to enslave them? Chen Wei answered these questions in a speech at the memorial's dedication. "We honor them because they were people," he said simply. "They made mistakes. They fought for a cause that was wrong. But they were still people with families and hopes and dreams. And they died in a war that should never have happened. If we forget that, If we see them only as enemies and not as people, then we become what we fought against. The memorial became one of the most visited sites on Earth. Delegations from across the galaxy came to see it. Many were moved to tears, if their species was capable of tears. 50 years passed. An entire generation grew up never knowing life under the old council. The Galactic Assembly became the normal way of doing things. Conflicts still happened, but they were resolved through negotiation and law, not through domination and force. Humanity slowly reduced the size of its fleet. Not all the way. They still maintained the largest military in the galaxy. But they reduced it enough to show good faith, to show that they trusted the system they had helped create. Chen Wei was 94 years old when he made his last trip to the Galactic Assembly Chamber. He could barely walk now, even with medical technology. His body was failing, but his mind was still sharp. A young reporter from one of the tributary species that had been freed met him outside the chamber. She was barely 20 years old. She had been born after the war. She had never lived under the council's rule. "Secretary General Chen Wei," she said respectfully, "I have a question if you have time." "I have time," Chen Wei said with a smile. "At my age, time is all I have." "Has humanity forgiven the galaxy?" she asked. "For the vote? For trying to enslave Earth?" Chen Wei was quiet for a long moment. He looked up at the building where that vote had taken place so many years ago, where he had stood alone and watched as nearly 1,000 civilizations voted to take away his people's freedom. "Forgiveness is not forgetting," he said finally. "We remember the vote. We remember every detail. We remember the war that followed. We remember every person who died, human and alien alike. We remember the atrocities and the suffering and the cost." He turned to look at the young reporter. "But we also remember why we fought. We did not fight for revenge. We fought for the right of all beings to be free. We fought so that no species would ever do to another what was done to us. So you have forgiven them?" The reporter pressed. Chen Wei shook his head slowly. "Forgiveness is too simple a word for what happened. We do not forget. We do not pretend it did not happen. But we also do not let hatred rule us. We built something better instead. That is our answer to what they did. Not forgiveness. Not revenge. Justice." He started to walk toward the chamber, then stopped and turned back. "The galaxy voted to enslave humanity. We voted with our blood and courage for something better. And we won. That is what I want you to remember. Not the vote that tried to take our freedom. The choice we made to fight for everyone's freedom." Chen Wei walked into the assembly,